Maya Rodriguez hadn't seen another living soul in 837 days. The solitude suited her just fine. After 15 years in military engineering and 2 tours handling drone defense systems in the resource wars, she'd had her fill of human contact. Her underground facility, built into an abandoned missile silo in the New Mexico desert, offered everything she needed: security, silence, and most importantly, control. That control shattered on a Tuesday evening when her perimeter sensors screamed to life. Maya was in her workshop, elbow deep in the guts of a maintenance bot when the first alarm sounded. The sound sent her heart racing, not the usual warning of passing wildlife or weather anomalies, but the distinctive tone she'd programmed for objects entering atmosphere at high velocity. "Display quad view," she commanded, and her workbench's surface transformed into 4 holographic panels showing different angles of the sky above her facility. The object cut through the stratosphere like a knife, trailing plasma and debris. Its trajectory was too controlled for a meteor, its design too elegant for human craft. "Track and analyze," Maya ordered, already moving to her armory. The computer's response was immediate: object classification, unknown. Mass, approximately 2,800 kilograms. Composition, multiple unknown alloys. Projected impact, 2.3 kilometers northeast. Maya sealed herself into her combat exosuit, a prototype she'd borrowed during her last military assignment. The suit's servos hummed to life as she loaded up with defensive gear, not the heavy weapons, not yet. 837 days of paranoid preparation had taught her to be ready for anything, but not to show all her cards at once. The impact shook the entire facility. On her displays, Maya watched the vessel plow into the desert floor, carving a trench through red rock and sand before coming to rest in a twisted heap of metallic fragments that seemed to shift color in the dying sunlight. "Life signs?" Maya asked, heading for the surface elevator. 2 detected. Biorhythms non-human. 1 showing critical fluctuations. Maya hesitated at the elevator controls. The smart play was to lock down, observe, and wait for whatever was coming to pass her by. She'd built this sanctuary to escape the world's chaos, not to invite more of it inside. But then she saw the second figure through her drone feeds, smaller than the first, moving with the awkward gait of youth. A child, or whatever passed for one among their species. Maya cursed under her breath and hit the ascent button. The desert air hit her like a physical force when she emerged, even through the suit's environmental shields. The crash site was clearly visible, a smoking scar in the landscape crowned by twisted metal that somehow managed to look both organic and crystalline at once. Movement caught her eye, 2 figures staggering away from the wreck. The larger one was clearly wounded, luminescent blood trailing from several injuries. Their skin was a deep purple that seemed to ripple with subsurface patterns, their form humanoid but more angular, with joints that bent in subtly wrong ways. They supported a smaller figure who shared their coloring but moved with the universal uncertainty of a child. Maya was about to call out when her threat detection systems screamed a warning. The air behind the aliens began to distort, reality itself seeming to fold and twist. Through the rippling distortion, something massive began to take shape, a towering form of geometric patterns and impossible angles that hurt her eyes to look at directly. The wounded alien saw it too. They shoved the child forward and turned to face the manifesting horror, raising their hands in what looked like a defensive stance. Energy crackled between their fingers, forming complex patterns that mirrored the geometry of the thing pursuing them. "Please." The word crashed into Maya's mind with the force of a thunderclap. The child must survive. The archive must survive. Help us. Maya had sworn never to get involved in another fight. She'd built this place to escape, to hide, to forget. But some choices, she realized as she charged her suit's shield generators, weren't really choices at all. "Over here," she shouted through her external speakers. "Run for the entrance. I'll cover you." The next few moments were chaos. The child sprinted toward her while the adult alien engaged the geometric horror in what looked like mathematical warfare, reality warping and twisting around their clash. Maya's sensors were going haywire, struggling to process what they were seeing as fundamental forces bent and broke around the combatants. She reached the child first, up close. They looked even more alien, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern and skin that rippled with chromatic patterns. But the fear in those eyes was utterly human. Maya scooped them up just as the adult alien disengaged from their attacker with a reality-bending leap that brought them to Maya's position. "The elevator," Maya said, "already running. We need to get below." The geometric entity's voice shook the ground itself. "The archive cannot be allowed to propagate. Surrender it or face dissolution." They reached the elevator as crystalline patterns began spreading across the desert floor. Maya slammed the descent control, and the doors slid closed on the sight of that impossible figure looming over them, its form now large enough to blot out the sky. As they descended into the relative safety of her bunker, Maya looked at her 2 unexpected guests, one wounded but defiant, the other trembling but alive. She'd just violated every rule she'd made for herself about staying uninvolved, about keeping the world at bay. "I'm Maya," she said finally. "And I have a feeling you're about to tell me this is much bigger than just giving you sanctuary." The adult alien's 4 eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. "I am Vextari, and this is my ward, Kira. And you are correct, what pursues us threatens not just our peoples, but the very nature of reality itself." Above them, Maya's sensors reported the geometric entity had begun trying to breach her facility's outer defenses. She'd built this place to keep the world out, but now it would have to serve a different purpose, keeping something in that belonged to a world she never could have imagined. Maya's bunker had been designed to withstand nuclear strikes, biological weapons, and even targeted electromagnetic pulses. She'd never anticipated it would need to defend against mathematical anomalies that violated the laws of physics. "Your defenses won't hold forever," Vextari said, pressing a hand against the medical bay's diagnostic scanner. Their wounds leaked luminescent fluid that seemed to hover between liquid and light. "The geometrists don't obey conventional physics. They exist in more dimensions than your technology can detect." Maya watched as her medical systems struggled to make sense of the alien's biology. "Then help me understand what we're dealing with. What's this archive they're after? Why are they willing to tear reality apart to get it?" Kira, the child, sat cross-legged on a nearby bed, their 4 eyes fixed on a holographic display showing the facility's outer defenses. The geometric patterns spreading across the desert surface had already covered most of the crash site, transforming the landscape into a maze of impossible angles and crystalline formations. "Show her," Vextari told Kira. "She has earned that much by sheltering us." The child nodded and closed their eyes. Suddenly, the air between them shimmered, and Maya felt knowledge pouring directly into her mind. Images, concepts, and understanding that bypassed language entirely. She saw a universe older than their own, one where mathematics wasn't just a tool for describing reality, but the fundamental fabric of existence itself. She saw the geometrists, beings who had evolved beyond physical form to exist as pure mathematical constructs, expanding across reality like a virus, converting everything they touched into extensions of their grand equation. And she saw the archive, not a physical database, but a living collection of mathematical principles encoded into DNA itself, passed down through generations. Kira wasn't just a child, they were a repository of knowledge that could either save the universe or help the geometrists complete their conversion of all reality. "The archive contains the fundamental theorems of existence," Vextari explained as the vision faded. "Including the proofs that could either stabilize reality against the geometrists' influence or help them complete their grand convergence. That's why Kira is so important. That's why they'll never stop hunting us." Maya's head throbbed from the direct information transfer. "Why not just destroy the knowledge if it's so dangerous?" "Because it's also the only hope of stopping them," Vextari said. The archive contains the mathematical principles that could allow us to. They were interrupted by a violent tremor that shook the entire facility. Maya rushed to the nearest console. They're probing the outer barriers. The geometric distortions are starting to affect my sensor arrays. On the surface displays, the crystalline formations had begun growing in impossible directions, forming structures that seemed to fold through dimensions Maya's eyes couldn't process. The geometrist entity had split into multiple forms, each one probing her defenses from angles that shouldn't have existed. Your barriers operate on three-dimensional principles, the entity's voice resonated through the facility's structure itself. We exist in 11. Resistance is mathematically futile. They're right, Vextari admitted. Conventional defenses won't stop them for long. But perhaps. They turned to Maya with an intensity that made their skin ripple with subsurface patterns. Your species has something we've observed, something that might help. You can think illogically. You can conceive of things that shouldn't work, shouldn't exist, and somehow make them real. Maya frowned. You're saying our greatest weapon is human irrationality? Precisely. The geometrists operate on pure mathematical logic. They cannot comprehend or counter actions that defy their fundamental axioms. Your military background, combined with human creativity. Vextari winced as another tremor shook the facility. It might be exactly what we need. Maya watched as crystalline patterns began spreading across her outer cameras, transforming them into fractal arrays that broadcast impossible images. Her sensors were going dark one by one as reality itself was rewritten around her sanctuary. She thought about the prototype weapons in her deeper storage levels, the experimental tech she'd been developing in her years of isolation. None of it had been tested. Most of it probably violated several laws of physics. The calculations said they shouldn't work at all. I have some ideas, she said finally. But you're not going to like them. I'm not even sure I like them. Kira looked up from the holographic display, their four eyes blinking in sequence. The archive contains no reference to human methods of warfare. This is why we sought sanctuary here, on your world. You are an unknown variable in their equations. Another violent tremor, and Maya's primary power grid fluctuated. The geometric patterns had reached her secondary sensor array, transforming it into a crystalline structure that pulsed with multidimensional energy. We have perhaps 3 hours before they breach the main facility, Vextari said. Whatever you're planning, it must be done before they convert enough of your technology to establish a stable foothold in this reality. Maya nodded, already moving toward her workshop. Kira comes with me. I'll need direct access to the archive's mathematical principles for what I have in mind. And Vextari. I need you to tell me everything you know about how these things process reality. Every weakness, every logical assumption they make. What are you planning? Vextari asked. Maya allowed herself a grim smile. Something completely irrational. I'm going to build a weapon that runs on pure mathematical contradictions. If these geometrists really operate on perfect logic, let's see how they handle a paradox made physical. Above them, reality continued to twist and fold as the geometrists pressed their attack. Maya had built this facility to keep the world out, but now it would serve a different purpose, as a laboratory for an experiment that defied the very laws of mathematics itself. She just hoped they could complete their work before the boundaries between possible and impossible completely collapsed around them. Maya's workshop had become a battlefield between order and chaos. Holographic equations floated in the air, their symbols twisting into impossible configurations as Kira fed mathematical principles from the archive directly into her design systems. Parts and prototypes lay scattered across every surface, many of them glowing with energies that shouldn't exist. This is insanity, Vextari said, watching as Maya modified one of her experimental power cores. You're deliberately introducing mathematical errors into your technology. The physical contradictions alone should tear it apart. That's exactly the point. Maya's fingers flew across her workbench, manipulating circuits that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Your people tried to fight the geometrists with perfect equations. But what happens to a being of pure logic when it encounters something that's fundamentally illogical? Another tremor shook the facility. On Maya's monitors, the geometric corruption had spread through 60% of her outer defenses. The crystalline patterns were evolving, learning from each system they converted, becoming more complex with each passing minute. The archive contains theories about mathematical impossibilities, Kira said, their 4 eyes tracking multiple data streams at once. But they were always purely theoretical. No one ever tried to make them real. Maya grabbed a neural interface helmet from a nearby rack. Show me those theories. All of them. She winced as Kira transmitted another burst of mathematical knowledge directly into her mind. The concepts were overwhelming, equations that contradicted themselves, geometries that couldn't exist, numbers that were simultaneously finite and infinite. Your attempts at irrationality are noted, the geometrist's voice resonated through the facility. But chaos can always be reduced to order. All patterns eventually submit to mathematical truth. Maya ignored them, focusing on the prototype taking shape before her. It looked wrong, like an object that had been assembled from pieces of different realities. Its surfaces seemed to curve in directions that eyes couldn't follow, and looking at it for too long caused a deep, instinctive discomfort. What exactly are you building? Vextari asked, keeping their distance from the device. A paradox engine, Maya replied. Something that doesn't just break the laws of physics, it actively generates mathematical impossibilities. The more the geometrists try to analyze it, the more it'll force them to process contradictions they can't resolve. But the power requirements. Vextari began. Will be impossible, Maya finished. That's why we're going to power it with impossibility itself. She pointed to a crystalline formation that had begun growing through one wall of her workshop. They've been so focused on converting our reality to match their mathematics, they haven't considered we might use their own conversions against them. Understanding dawned in Vextari's 4 eyes. You're going to use their reality warping effects as a power source. The archive contains principles of energy conversion, Kira added, their skin rippling with excited patterns. If we invert the standard equations. Another violent tremor interrupted them. Maya's main screen flashed a critical warning. The geometric corruption had reached the facility's primary power core. Crystalline patterns were spreading through her energy distribution systems, transforming them into structures that pulsed with multidimensional light. We're running out of time, Maya said, making final adjustments to her prototype. Once they finish converting my power systems, they'll have enough energy to completely rewrite local spacetime. The paradox engine hummed to life, emitting frequencies that made Maya's teeth ache. Reality seemed to bend around it, as if the very fabric of space was trying to reject its existence. Warning alerts flashed across every screen as her sensors tried and failed to analyze what they were detecting. Alert, mathematical anomaly detected, the geometrist announced. Attempting to resolve logical inconsistencies. It's working, Vextari said. They're being drawn to the contradictions. But Maya. They placed a hand on her shoulder. If we activate this at full power, the mathematical backlash could tear this entire facility apart. Maybe this entire region of spacetime. Maya checked the final calculations one more time. The numbers didn't add up, couldn't add up, by definition. That was exactly what they needed. Sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to break everything, she said. Including the rules themselves. Kira stepped forward, placing their small hand on the paradox engine. The archive contains one more principle you should see, they said. About the nature of sacrifice, and how impossible things become possible when someone is willing to pay the price. The child's skin began to glow with complex patterns, mathematical symbols that seemed to write themselves in light. Maya realized with sudden clarity that the archive wasn't just stored in Kira's DNA, it was a living thing, evolving, growing, waiting for exactly this moment to reveal its final theorem. Above them, the geometrists began their final assault, reality twisting and shattering as they brought their full power to bear on the facility's remaining defenses. Maya had less than 5 minutes to decide: activate the paradox engine and risk destroying everything, or surrender to beings that would reduce all of existence to cold, perfect equations. The paradox engine's activation shook reality like a thunderclap. Maya watched in horror and fascination as space itself seemed to crumple around the device, forming patterns that simultaneously existed and didn't exist. Warning sirens blared throughout the facility as sensors overloaded trying to process what they were detecting. Mathematical anomaly exceeds acceptable parameters, the geometrist's voice boomed, but there was something different in its tone now, a hint of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Attempting to resolve. Attempting to. Error. 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 Kira stood with both hands pressed against the paradox engine, their skin blazing with living equations. The archive's knowledge flowed through them like a river of light, feeding impossible theorems directly into the device. Each pulse sent waves of unreality rippling through the facility, causing the crystalline corruptions to twist and fragment. The dimensional barriers are destabilizing, Vextari reported, monitoring what remained of Maya's sensor network. They can't maintain their conversion effect while processing the paradoxes. But Maya. They gestured to rapidly spreading cracks in the facility's walls. Your bunker wasn't designed to contain this level of reality distortion. Maya nodded grimly, sealing her exosuit's environmental systems. No turning back now. Kira, how long can you maintain the connection? The child's 4 eyes were glowing with mathematical energy. The archive is changing. Evolving. Every paradox we generate creates new theoretical possibilities. But they winced as another wave of power surged through them. It's too much knowledge. Too many impossibilities at once. The facility's main power core finally succumbed to the geometric corruption, transforming into a crystalline structure that pulsed with 11-dimensional energy. But instead of strengthening the geometrist's hold on reality, it fed directly into the paradox engine's impossible calculations. Your resistance is. The geometrist's voice fragmented into multiple overlapping frequencies. Probability matrices exceed. Logic trees show recursive. Cannot process. It's working. Maya exclaimed. They can't resolve the contradictions fast enough to maintain their conversion effect. She rushed to a backup console as another section of the facility began to collapse. If we can keep this up for just a few more minutes. Her words were cut off by a scream from Kira. The child's skin was now burning with such intense mathematical energy that looking at them directly hurt Maya's eyes. Something's wrong, they gasped. The archive, it's not just showing me theories anymore. It's showing me everything. All possibilities. All paradoxes. All at once. Vextari moved to pull Kira away from the paradox engine, but Maya grabbed their arm. Wait. Look at the sensor readings. The archive isn't just feeding data into the device, it's using it as a lens, focusing all those impossibilities into something new. The air around them began to crystallize, but not in the rigid geometric patterns of the invaders. These crystals were fluid, organic, shifting between states of matter in ways that defied categorization. Reality itself seemed to be renegotiating its fundamental principles. Critical logic error, the geometrist announced, its voice now splitting into countless competing versions of itself. Detected mathematical state that is simultaneously true and false. Paradox cascade imminent. Immediate withdrawal recommended. Maya's remaining sensors showed the crystalline corruption beginning to retreat from the facility's outer levels, but not fast enough. The paradox engine's effect was expanding exponentially, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of local spacetime. We have to shut it down, Vextari insisted. The reaction is becoming self-sustaining. If we don't stop it now, it could create a permanent wound in reality. But Kira's eyes had gone completely white with mathematical energy. No, they said, their voice overlaying itself in impossible harmonies. This is what the archive was waiting for. Not just a weapon against the geometrists, but a way to transcend their kind of order without losing ourselves to pure chaos. Maya's mind raced as she processed the implications. You're saying we can use this reaction to create a new kind of mathematics? Something that bridges the gap between their rigid logic and our human irrationality? Yes, Kira said. But the price? They looked at Maya with eyes that now seemed to see through multiple dimensions at once. Someone has to guide the transformation. Someone has to stand at the center of the paradox storm and give it shape. And once it begins, there's no coming back. Another violent tremor rocked the facility. The paradox engine's effect had grown beyond any possibility of containment. In less than 2 minutes, it would either collapse into a reality-destroying singularity or transform everything it touched into something entirely new. Maya looked at her sensor readings, then at Kira's glowing form, and finally at the retreating patterns of the geometrist invasion. She'd built this bunker to hide from the world, but now she faced a choice that would affect not just her world, but the nature of reality itself. No, she said finally. Not you. You're too young, and the archive is too important to risk. She began removing her exosuit's power core. I'll do it. My facility, my weapon, my responsibility. Maya, wait. Vextari reached for her, but she was already moving toward the paradox engine, her mind made up. She'd spent years hiding from the universe, but maybe this was why, maybe she'd been waiting for a moment when hiding wasn't enough, when someone had to step forward and embrace the impossible. Time seemed to slow as Maya stepped into the paradox engine's field. Reality bent around her like light through a prism, splitting her consciousness into countless parallel streams of thought. She felt the mathematical corruption trying to rewrite her at the quantum level, but something else was happening too. The impossible calculations were resonating with something deeply human within her. Alert, unauthorized integration detected, the geometrist's voice fractured across multiple dimensions. Human consciousness cannot survive direct exposure to pure mathematical truth. But they were wrong. Maya felt her mind expanding, perceiving reality through the lens of both logic and chaos simultaneously. The paradox engine wasn't just generating contradictions, it was creating a space where contradictions could coexist, where human intuition could dance with mathematical precision. The archive. Kira gasped, their 4 eyes wide with wonder. It's responding to her. The equations are adapting. Vextari's skin rippled with astonishment as they monitored the readings. Impossible. She's not just channeling the paradoxes, she's interpreting them. Finding patterns in the chaos that even the archive never predicted. Maya barely heard them. Her consciousness had expanded beyond the confines of normal spacetime. She could see the geometrists now, not just their physical manifestations, but their true nature, beings of pure mathematical thought, beautiful in their perfection but trapped by their own rigid laws. They had sought to impose order on a chaotic universe, never understanding that true harmony required both. You wanted perfection, she thought/spoke/calculated, her words rippling through dimensions. But perfection without imperfection is just another kind of entropy. Watch. Maya reached out with her transformed awareness, drawing on everything she was, the precision of her engineering training, the adaptability of her military experience, and most importantly, the beautiful irrationality of her human heart. Through the paradox engine, she began to weave a new kind of mathematics, one that didn't reject chaos or order, but united them in a dance of infinite possibility. The crystalline corruption around the facility began to change. Instead of rigid geometric patterns, it flowed like liquid light, forming structures that were simultaneously precise and organic. The geometrists recoiled, their perfect equations confronted with something they couldn't categorize, mathematics that breathed, logic that dreamed. Critical paradigm shift detected, they announced, their unified voice splintering into a chorus of uncertainty. Reconceptualization required. Withdrawing to process new theoretical framework. But Maya wasn't finished. Through her connection to the paradox engine, she reached into the archive itself, not just reading its equations but understanding them on a fundamental level. She saw what Kira's people had been trying to achieve, not a weapon against the geometrists, but a bridge between different ways of seeing reality. Now, she commanded, her consciousness stretching across dimensions. Complete the transformation. The paradox engine pulsed one final time, and reality rippled like a stone thrown into still water. The geometric corruption didn't just retreat, it transformed, becoming something new, something that carried elements of both order and chaos. The very foundations of spacetime around the facility shifted, creating a bubble of altered reality where multiple forms of mathematics could coexist. When the light faded, Maya found herself still standing, though forever changed. Her mind processed thoughts in ways that would have been impossible before, seeing connections between logic and intuition that revealed whole new layers of reality. "You did it," Vextari breathed, approaching her with a mixture of awe and concern. "You created a sustainable paradox state, a space where their mathematics and our chaos can coexist without destroying each other." Kira rushed to Maya's side, their small hand taking hers. The archive's equations still flowed through the child's skin, but now they moved in harmony with the new patterns Maya had created. "The archive was incomplete before," they said. "It needed human insight to show us how to bridge the gap between pure logic and pure chaos." Maya looked at her transformed facility, now a shimmering confluence of multiple mathematical realities. The rigid walls had become fluid crystal, simultaneously solid and flowing, a physical manifestation of the paradox she'd embraced. Her bunker was no longer just a shelter, it had become a nexus point between different ways of understanding reality. "They'll be back," she said, knowing it with mathematical certainty. "Not as invaders this time, but as seekers. What we've created here, it changes everything they thought they knew about the nature of existence." Vextari nodded. "And when they return, they'll find something unprecedented, a place where order and chaos dance together, where human irrationality and mathematical precision create something greater than either could achieve alone." Maya smiled, feeling the new mathematics flowing through her transformed consciousness. She had built this place to hide from the world, but instead, she'd created something that would change worlds, a testament to humanity's greatest strength, the ability to embrace contradiction, to find harmony in discord, to make the impossible possible through sheer determination and heart. "Well," she said, watching as the last traces of geometric corruption transformed into flowing crystal, "I guess this means I'll have to update my security protocols. Anyone know how to write firewall rules for 11-dimensional space?" Kira laughed, the sound carrying harmonics that hadn't existed in our universe before today. The archive's equations danced across their skin in celebration, and for the first time since this began, Maya felt truly certain of her choice. She had stopped hiding and faced the impossible head-on, and in doing so, she'd helped create something entirely new, a future where logic and chaos, order and freedom, could exist not in conflict, but in harmony. The bunker hummed around them with its new hybrid energy, a sanctuary no longer just from the world, but for a whole new way of seeing reality. And somewhere in the mathematical depths of space-time, Maya knew, the geometrists were already beginning to change, their perfect equations learning to dance with chaos, their rigid logic learning to dream.